Hey guys, so I'm still finishing up my next big review just in time for the holiday season. In the meantime, I might as well give my brief thoughts on another movie that I saw over the weekend. That's right, I am going to be reviewing the highly anticipated movie of 2021 that was years in the making, known as the Tom and Jerry movie on HBO Max, otherwise known as Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, I gotta be completely honest with you guys and say that I was actually pretty excited for this movie.
What?
Yes, I know this is the movie that has been kind of mocked and made fun of for years due to numerous factors, but let me explain, because there are at least 3 reasons to why I was actually looking forward to the Snyder Cut version of Justice League. Reason number 1, I like the DC Cinematic Universe. Well,
Do you bleed?
for the most part. It's been a really rocky history with DC when it comes to their films. However, despite some films that were definitely not great, I have been at least interested in what they've been doing for a cinematic universe like this. Especially when a DC universe on the level of Marvel is something that I've always wanted to see unfold on film since the MCU was a thing. Plus, to their credit, in recent years, they have been doing a lot more stuff that has been interesting and showing some signs of improvements for their universe, especially when their projects are different and even a bit more stand out from what Marvel has to offer recently. Second reason, Josh Whedon. No, seriously, something that has rubbed me and a lot of other people the wrong way with the original Justice League cut is the fact that any sort of artistic integrity was ruined due to how the studio decided to rush the film in production to hit a deadline. And having Josh Whedon take over last minute really made this version of Justice League feel rather hollow and empty. For as flawed as Zack Snyder's other movies were, you can at least acknowledge there was at least a little bit of passion and sense of creativity given to him to make his version of these characters. That, and considering all the things Josh Whedon himself has revealed to be, including the stuff with the cast and crew of Justice League, I say these guys deserve to get a second shot at their movie, especially due to all the poor mistreatment they got from poor studio decisions. So yeah, Josh Whedon. And yes, I know Snyder is far from the best director out there, even by DC standards. And yes, the fan base can get really annoying and obnoxious. But come on, not only did he as a director not properly finish a movie that he was passionate on, but the man lost his kid tragically. Cut the guy a break. And finally, my main reason for being excited for the Snyder Cut is not necessarily because I think it would be a good movie per se. I was more interested in this to see how an experiment like this would be done, because we have never seen something on the level like this before. A studio giving a director a second chance at a project that was meant to be one of the biggest movies of all time and given full creative control to make it 100% the film he originally intended. As someone who loves to support directors and artists giving their vision out there, this is a bold and neat move to see happen to such a big degree. Yes, it's Zack Snyder, but it's still something that I think could lead to better things. By now we know films can be ruined by studio meddling, and the worst kind of movies are the ones that are seen as nothing more but products to make a quick buck. So to see one of the biggest properties get this kind of treatment for a movie that wasn't good could be a good thing, as directors are known to be better when they're unlimited with what they can do and to be able to make the film they want to make. Are there movies that arguably deserve a director's cut more than the Snyder Cut? Maybe. I'd be down with a real director's cut of the Suicide Squad, or even Solo. God knows those movies could benefit from that after their production hell. But if this is the starting point, whether it be good or bad, it would be at least an interesting thing to witness, and hopefully, if nothing else, could lead to more studios actually making their movies better than what we originally got. So at the end of the day, I've been very supportive of this project and hoping that at the very least it'll be an interesting one to unfold regardless of the actual quality of the film. So, with all that said and done, and after all these years, is Zack Snyder's version of Justice League any good?
Yes!
Okay. Wait a minute.
Now, when I say good, I'm not just saying good compared to the theatrical version, even though that's definitely true here. Right from the opening credits, you know that this is not the same movie you saw back in 2017. Not only are there a plethora of moments in this movie that weren't in the original cut, but scenes are structured and even paced in a different fashion than how they originally were. There are certainly scenes from a standard glance that do feel similar to the original cut. However, even when those scenes occur, they feel a lot different in terms of execution. The first scene that really showcased that is Wonder Woman's first action scene. It's still here and very similar to the Whedon version, but the way the action is edited and even looks this time around is done much differently, as Snyder tries to execute it more in his style, and it actually works here. It was clear that in the original cut, Whedon had a lot more control in the post-production, as it didn't feel like Snyder's movie, and having a director who's more there just to give what the studio wanted, rather than not giving the time and attention that the original director wanted to make this scene to convey, really hurt that movie, as Snyder managed to take an okay action sequence to something really freaking badass and exciting. Surprisingly, unlike Snyder's other DC movies, this movie doesn't waste as much time with excessive filler. It is a 4-hour movie, but time isn't wasted as much this time around, as 25 minutes into this movie, I was honestly sold. Snyder's version of Justice League easily has the most action out of his movies for the DC universe, and it's spread throughout the movie very evenly to the point where it's not really dull. And another big factor that makes this movie stand out is that this version of Justice League is rated R. And yes, MPA ratings don't always make a movie better. Look at Alien vs. Predator directly. But in the case of the Snyder Cut, it utilizes the R rating better than I thought. Mainly because compared to the average Marvel movie, there's actually blood when we see people get stabbed and shot, which it's kind of cool to see, especially when it does add a sense of realism to an extent. The violence showcase here isn't as extreme as other comic book movies, or Zack Snyder movies for that matter. In fact, while we're talking about not going extreme, an element of Snyder's movies that are criticized is how edgy they try to be, and also how pretentious they tend to act when it comes to treating these characters. But that's not the case at all here. The movie is darker than Whedon's version, yes, but it's also lighter than BVS or Man of Steel. And I think it's because Zack Snyder seems to be putting more emotion and character depth into this movie. Even though the film is 4 hours long, it utilizes time better than the other DC Snyder movies due to all the time and development given to those characters. We get a good understanding of them here, especially Cyborg.
When there's trouble, you know what to do. Call Cyborg!
Now, I love my man Cyborg, but the theatrical version barely utilized this character at all, with so many scenes with him feeling rushed, including the CG. Not only does he look better here, but his backstory does have a lot of emotion to it. And it becomes so much more satisfying to see him join the actual Justice League because of that backstory we're given to this character. The other DC characters also are really good here. Affleck and Godot are still awesome as Batman and Wonder Woman. Ezra Miller is good as the Flash, despite still a few misfired jokes in this cut, but not as prevalent. Jason Momoa actually has a bit more charisma here than I thought he had in both Aquaman and the Whedon cut, and even the villain is vastly improved. Not saying that Steppenwolf is the end-all, be-all villain that all DC antagonists should strive to be, but especially compared to the half-ass CG done in the original cut, he is a much-needed improvement. He might be a lackey at his core still, but the character still has a presence due to his stature and design. And we even see more about him and have an understanding of him to why he might be working for someone like Darkseid in some very subtle ways. Which, on the topic of other big DC characters, this movie has a ton of fan service for DC fans, which could lead to a disaster. But fortunately, the Easter eggs and stuff that does appear in this movie is done with care and is actually really great to see unfold yet again. This movie in particular, I think, emphasized what made Snyder a good choice to direct so many of these DC movies in the first place. In comparison to Marvel, their heroes represent sort of the modern age of superheroes, where they are treated in their universe and in general as someone to admire and look up to. someone who truly does incredible things to help others. DC heroes are more like living legends. They do just as much protecting and heroic stuff as Marvel characters, but the characters in this universe treat these heroes like they're extraordinary, and it's partially due to a number of different factors. DC characters at this point have gotten so many different versions in film, TV, and the comics that it's no different than a lot of the different interpretations and retellings of ancient myths from different crosses of cultures. They have a core element of similarities in each adaptation, but the things people will emphasize in one adaptation of Superman can be totally different from another, giving this such a variety. Even in their universe, the fact that these characters tend to have more secret identities, and the fact that so many around the world are aware of these characters' status, and people talk about them like it's an experience witnessing a character like Superman take flight. Superman himself is influenced by legends like Moses or Hercules, and in a lot of his movies, he's treated like that due to how unbelievably powerful he is. Wonder Woman is a character based around Amazonian culture. Again, that's something that's often seen among legends. Even Batman, while doesn't have any extraordinary powers, is still treated like a legend in Gotham. Think about it, the way criminals would always act suspicious when nightfall comes, and they say stuff about how they don't want to get caught by the bat. They're treating him like he's some sort of spirit that haunts the city of Gotham, much like some of the classic horror legends out there. It's something that's actually kind of eye-opening when it comes to really thinking about these characters. And more so than any of his other movies, Snyder really makes these characters feel like they're legends with everything they do and how these characters are treated in here. The backstory with Darkseid is filmed and showcased almost like we're witnessing a tale of an ancient evil legend and the war that broke out with them. It's kind of epic to see, actually, and utilizes Snyder's strengths very well. Something that could be said about other DC movies from Snyder is that they do feel huge in scale, as this movie almost feels like if Infinity War was crossed with Lord of the Rings at point. Not as good as either of those movies, but it generally feels like an epic, as this whole movie treats its story and characters like they're larger than life, and it's awesome to see. There's no reliance on jokes either, with a lot of the ones completely omitted from this version of the movie, yet it still has more humor than the other two Snyder films, namely with The Flash, who does have some fun moments here and there too. For as much as I have praised this movie, it's not perfect. The main issue I have with this movie is that sometimes this movie does feel a little overindulgent in the Zack Snyder way, namely in a few moments that feel more like a music video in the way that it's edited and structured. They're still alright and enjoyable to watch, but even watching it, you can tell it might be going on a bit too long, and Snyder is maybe focusing a bit too much on insignificant things. That, and also the epilogue, I can also see being done differently as well. With that said, I actually didn't have too much of an issue with the length thanks to how well paced this movie was. But with the overindulgent music video-like segments and the movie arguably going too long with its epilogue, I would be lying and said I couldn't easily see these sequences edited differently to make the movie a bit shorter. As I don't think this exact movie and the way it is now would be the one we have gotten in 2017. But the epilogue is where I could see how this could be edited into a shorter movie that's more like this version, but also not like the Whedon version either. Though overall, I'll end my thoughts with possibly the main reason why I think this movie is so great, and why I am happy that it turned out a million times better than what it could have been. At the end of the day, this movie is honestly the kind of film I have been waiting for years now. And I'm not talking about the whole release the Snyder Cut movement. Even though as someone who loves seeing directors get creative control, I'm glad this succeeded after the trouble Zack and his crew went through. But more so the fact that this project is a dream that I wanted to see unfold for such a long time now. A full-fledged Justice League movie that's not only a good movie, but is also the exact kind of Justice League movie I wanted to see be a reality for years now. This movie treats its characters with respect, doesn't try to copy what Marvel does, like the Whedon version, and just feels like this epic that these characters, honest to God, deserve. It has been a rocky history with DC, between all the disappointment with them as a studio, and also with so many being very doubtful on many upcoming DC projects. It's inspiring to see a movie that had so many against it, and it ending up succeeding because of how it managed to deliver what many DC fans have always dreamt of since the Marvel Cinematic Universe became a thing. It's not the end-all be-all comic book movie. In fact, compared to Marvel and even DC themselves, there have been a few better projects from them for sure. Even then, I still can't help but be truly thankful for this movie, for actually being the movie that proved DC can create something on the level of what we can expect from an awesome blockbuster movie based on some of the best comic book characters of all time. I'm not sure if Zack Snyder will return to direct any potential sequel this movie hinted at, but it is something that I would like to see expanded upon and continue in some fashion. If worse comes to worse and we don't get any of that, I am still going to be very happy that this movie came into existence. To quote the best live action DC movie of all time, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. If this movie is the last movie to come out of Zack Snyder that's a DC project, then I say he has left his mark as a hero for the future of DC. I'll be here to see what DC has to offer in the future, and this future is still looking so bright. But for now, I am thankful that we got the Justice League movie we deserve. It makes this whole entire crazy controversy that was Zack Snyder's Justice League completely worth it, in my honest opinion. So take that for what it's worth. Rating out of 10?
Booyah!
Good stuff. Check it out.